Today's guest is renewable energy financial analyst Frank Urro, a leader in solar strategy, energy conservation, and community driven power solutions. He helps homeowners and businesses make smarter, more profitable energy decisions.
Today, I'm really excited to bring our next guest speaker, Frank Urro. Can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
So I'm a renewable energy financial analyst, and I work a lot with renewable energies to help people reduce the cost of operating their building.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
And you work specifically in the residential and commercial space, right?
I do. Yes.
That's great. How did you get into this work?
So my degree is in electrical engineering and biology, and originally I thought I was going to become a doctor, and that didn't work out the way I had planned. But I wanted to do something that was still good for society and community. So I got involved in energy reduction strategies as an electrical engineer
Great.
um, in commercial buildings. So that was extremely fulfilling because you could walk into a building and cut their energy consumption by 50% just by doing some simple automation strategies. And the automation ended up being applied to a lot of what they call distributed generation. So it got to the point where the real um, the real impact, if you will, to a building operating cost and to help the grid offload was to put generation on property. And that's what solar is. Solar is distributed generation, right? And then along the way, I realized, well, people really only want to make the investment when it makes sense financially.
Hmm.
So that's when I started focusing on the financials, right? So I show people what the financials look like, and it almost always gets them to say, "Yeah, why aren't I doing this?" Right? And then when they're done, they've not only saved money, but they've done something good, for their community.
That's awesome. I love this story. How did you get into this work?
um, Well, as I said, I my background is electrical engineering. Distributed generation has a lot with electrical, so to speak, but
Yeah,
that has something to do with fossil fuels as well. Um, so it just was a natural fit. I spent some time in the wind industry, and I spent some time in the um, hydro industry.
okay.
But at the end of the day, you have to make money, and solar is easily permitted. Wind is very difficult to permit.
Sure,
So it's very
absolutely.
difficult to do a wind job, very difficult to do a hydro job. It's easy to do a solar job, particularly on roofs, because roofs are by right. You don't need anybody's permission to put solar on your roof. Whereas if you put solar on the ground, you need to get variances. You got to go to the planning board, blah, 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 right? So,
Yeah.
but on the roof, no one can stop you. As long as you are to code, they can't, they can't deny you.
That's great feedback, and I love your perspective and approach to it because you're taking it from a perspective of like, how can I actually help my client maximize their savings and make it make sense for them while also helping the planet and the community at the same time.
Right.
It's not just transactional for you. It's about an additional
Well,
sort of giving
well,
back.
well, one of the things people don't
Yeah.
focus on with regards to renewable energy, it actually does uplift the community, right? Because you're putting the generation of power in the hands of the community. And if you think about it, the biggest financial drain on a city, a town, a state, a country is energy, right? You pay, and those dollars leave your community. They leave the state, they leave the country, right? When you put energy or energy creation in the hands of local communities, they're generating power, and I could be generating power and selling it to you across the street.
Yeah.
So if I'm Farmer Joe and I have solar and I'm generating, a megawatt of energy. I'm certainly not using it. My cows don't use a lot of energy. So I'm selling that power and I'm making money and you're buying it, right?
Yep.
So you're recirculating dollars inside the community versus having you pay the power company, having Farmer Joe pay the power company, and all that money just leaves the community.
Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
I couldn't say it better. So thank you
Right.
for providing those examples
And it's
on there.
reducing emissions,
Yeah.
and it really is a community bolstering um, business model.
So would you say that solar is really beneficial for most homeowners?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The thing is, you never want to put solar on a bad roof,
Okay.
right? If the roof is in good shape, solar's the thing. And when you put solar on a roof, you actually freeze it in time. So a lot of people are concerned with, well, if I have a 5-year-old roof and you're telling me solar's going to be 25 years, what's going to happen? Well, when you cover that roof, that 5-year-old roof remains a 5-year-old roof for a long time because the thing that weathers a roof is sun, hail, snow, freezing rain, and none of that hits the roof anymore, right? It
Right,
just
it's being
falls to the solar
protected.
panel and then it slides off.
What are some things that you think that homeowners should really understand about solar, and what are sort of like some of the different ways that people can use solar to really maximize their energy efficiency?
The thing they really have to understand about solar is not really about the solar itself. It's about how they're paying for it, believe
Mm,
it or not. This industry has become more of more burdened by financial gymnastics than it has been about the technology. The technology is really simple. Solar panels generate electrons. The electrons go into an inverter, converts it to AC voltage, and you use the power. Brain dead simple. The problem is that it's such a good deal that there's always somebody trying to wiggle their way into the middle of that deal and capture some of your financial benefits,
okay.
right? So what any homeowner really wants to do is contact a few reputable solar installers, get some prices, take that price, go to the bank and say, hey, my friendly banker, my friendly local banker, again, thinking about community, I want to take out a HELOC to pay for this solar system. When you run the numbers that way, you'll be amazed at the savings. And if you then take just knowledgeably, right, just of
Sure.
being aware, take your regular monthly energy bill and throw it in the bank, right? Because now you're not paying it to the utility, right? Once that HELOC's paid off, take that monthly energy bill and just throw it in the bank, and you'll be amazed at how that bank account grows over time.
Wow. So this is a really interesting perspective. So let's kind of turn back a little bit here and kind of break it down. So when we're looking at the actual generation of energy from the solar,
Mm-hmm.
right? The idea is to try to offset as much of your your current electric bill as possible,
Exactly.
right? And so, generally speaking, utility companies will let you do anywhere between an 80% to maybe 95% offset, depending on where you're located and if your home can produce that kind of energy,
Right.
right?
That's the
Not
thing.
every home can, right?
Exactly.
There's other factors, shading, maybe you have other obstructions in front of the solar panels that prevent it from producing electricity.
Right. Let's
Um,
talk about shading for a second.
yes, please.
A lot of people get a little bit um, put off when a reputable solar guy says it would be worth it for you to take out that tree, right?
Hmm.
Well, first of all, if you have a tree that close to your house, I used to deal with large tree removals. It's not a good thing because sooner or later that tree is going to impinge on your foundation.
Mm.
So taking down that tree, really, don't worry about it. It should go. But
So it's not a bad thing to take out the
it's
tree,
not the
and
bad
that's
thing to take
okay.
out the tree. And if you compute the amount of carbon that you're going to offset by generating the power by removing that tree, those solar panels far exceed what that tree is capable of consuming, right? Because large older trees consume less carbon than a growing tree. So if it's that big and it's really shading your roof, it's not consuming as much carbon as you think. So taking out that tree in lieu of putting up panels to offset your electrical consumption is much better from a carbon standpoint.
Understood. So, and obviously everything in moderation, because if you're doing it as a residential, it's maybe one or two or a few trees around your property.
Exactly.
But commercial, you can be talking about deforestation, right? Which then it becomes an issue on
Well,
the commercial side.
commercial, I'm a big proponent of rooftop,
Yeah.
right? So there's no deforestation.
Right.
I'm not a big proponent of fields, solar
Right.
fields, cut
Okay.
down trees, put up solar. I'm not a big proponent of that because there's much better uses for that property, namely the production of food.
Mm.
Um, that's kind of my other thing. I'm big into nutrition. So if you get that kind of property, raise animals on it or grow crops on it, but definitely don't put solar on it. Um, when I was talking about Farmer John and the solar, I'm talking about like ag solar projects. And I don't know if you've ever seen these, but they take elevated solar racking. They get it up off the ground, and the animals actually graze under the solar.
Underneath it. Oh, interesting. Oh, that's great. That's a
Right.
great. That's
So
a
you can
great way to
have
do it.
goats, and you can have cows, you can have sheep, you can have chickens and ducks, and yeah,
Yeah, so it provides a sense of coverage over the animals and
exactly.
also over the foods and stuff. So that's a great way to actually be able to take
Yeah,
advantage of solar in
yeah,
that situation. Thank you for
yeah.
sharing that.
Pollinators.
Yep, pollinators as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, kind of talking about some of the incentives and some urgency that's kind of going on. We've seen over the last couple of years a lot of these incentives come and go rather quickly. And it sounds like right now with solar specifically, we're approaching the kind of tail end of it, right? It sounds like December 31st is when a lot of the residential incentives are going to be going away and
Right.
a lot of the commercial ones, coming next year in
Right.
2026 will be going away. Kind of talk a little bit about that and sort of the urgency behind homeowners getting estimates now.
So right now, the solar incentives have never been better in the state of Massachusetts. Um, the smart incentive is the highest it's ever been, and the federal tax credit is 30%, right? And if you're a commercial business, there's the largest capital depreciation they've ever had. Now, you're right. Solar credits, incentives have gone up and have come down, gone up and have come down. My take on that is that happens to throttle the market, because what happens is when the credits get when the incentives get really good, the market gets flooded, everybody gets taxed, including the utilities, because they have to figure out how to connect all this stuff. So to curb the market, slow it down a little bit, they peel back the incentives, right? So I don't know if these incentives will never come back again, but what I do know is when they reach a maximum peak historically, every time they've reached a new high, they have come down shortly after. And then they sort of bounce around down here. Then they realize, oh, wait a second, we have to infuse the market again, and the incentives come back.
Hmm.
Right? I mean, there's been times where solar people had absolutely nothing from an incentive perspective to sell. And it's just how it goes. The incentives, they come and they go.
Interesting. So now we have the 30% tax credit, the solar tax credit
Mm-hmm.
available that is going to be going away at the end of December. And a lot of solar companies are sort of like adding a lot of urgency, if you will,
Right.
to consumers to try to lock in those rates.
Right.
So, what are things that consumers should be really taking into consideration of these incentives? And then, as well as the timing, because at this stage, it's essentially the middle of November right now of
Right.
2025,
Yeah.
and so these incentives really only have about a month and a half before these programs go away.
Yeah.
What are things that you'd recommend to consumers,
They
when they're doing
they
their research?
well, the bottom line is they need to have the system completely completed by the 31st of
Oh wow.
2025. Right. That's how they can apply for their
So
30%
it's
tax
not
credit.
even getting a contract in place by the 31st. It has to be
Has to
completely
be
installed and
completed.
operational.
Yeah.
So at this stage it's pretty much
I think it's a little bit of gray area about operational, because the utility may not come out and turn it on. But if you can prove that you are in completion, I think the IRS won't have a problem with that.
oh
But
wow.
whether or not the utility actually comes out and gets it turned on, sometimes that alone can take 30 days.
So what happens after the 31st?
The 30% tax credit goes away.
It's gone.
It's gone for
Okay.
for residential, right?
So
But the numbers, don't get me wrong, the numbers still work. Instead of getting a 6 or 7 year break even, you get a 12-year break even.
okay.
So if you're looking to, um, do something that's good for the community, and sort of lock in your electricity price, because regardless of what people tell you, electricity is going to continue to go up,
Absolutely.
right?
Hmm.
So it's always worth it to run the numbers, and then you decide whether or not you want to pay for 12 years of electricity but get 25 years worth, right? Because so basically you're cutting your electric bill in half,
Hmm.
right? Because everything on the roof is guaranteed for 25 years. Your panels have a 25-year warranty on them if you're buying tier one, good quality panels, which is what you'll get from a reputable installer. And the inverters have a 25-year warranty. So you're going to get 25 to 30 years of production. um, and you'll break even in about 12 after the 31st. But do it now, and you'll break even in about 6 or 7.
Okay. So that's interesting. So for individuals that already locked into these contracts and already getting their projects already scheduled before the 31st, they could be looking at a break even between 6 to 8 years
Yeah,
on average.
exactly.
And those that are not able to get those incentives, maybe they'll come back with incentives later on. We don't know. Um, but the reality is that looking at between 10 to 13 years for an average break even for
Right,
those homes
right.
on there. But
For
it's
homes, and I just want to throw this in there just in case you have any viewers that own a commercial building. On the commercial side, your break even is below 3,
oh wow.
right? So if you're a commercial building out there, you should be taking advantage
But
of this.
actually, let's just dive in quickly. I know the focus of this class is for homeowners, but many of them may be business owners as well.
Yeah.
So really quickly, just in just a few moments, kind of explain why that is for the commercial side.
That's because you can depreciate the system 100% in 1 year, in
Okay.
the first year. So you get not only the 30%, which you can increase to 40% if you use domestic content. So if you buy equipment that's built in the United States, you get a 40% tax credit, which again, any reputable installer, if you request that, they'll do it. It'll cost you a little bit more, but the incentive more than negates it.
Mm,
And then you can depreciate it. Like if you're a business owner and you bought a new machine for your shop, a new dryer, a new washer, whatever it is, you get to depreciate that equipment. Normally, you get to depreciate it over the life expectancy of that piece of equipment. Under the solar rules, you can depreciate it 100% in the first year. You don't have to depreciate it over the life of the solar. So you get all of that back in the first year. So let's say as a business owner, you were spending, you know, 50 or $100,000 on a solar project. You're going to get more than 50% of that back in the first year. So your investment really is not 100,000 because you're going to get that 50% back right away. The investment's really closer to 50,000,
wow.
right?
Wow, that's incredible. So just curious. So, you know, commercial properties now are deemed 5 units or more. For housing, would a housing unit with 5 or more units qualify for something like this?
It would. The challenge is what do you do with the power,
Okay.
right? In a housing unit, um, there's not, landlords aren't big on selling energy, right? It complicates their business model.
Okay.
So on a multifamily, um, I always recommend if you own a multifamily and live in a unit, absolutely put solar on the roof
Interesting.
and put it behind your meter and you use the power.
Okay.
But if you don't own it, what do you do with the power?
Now, any excess power that's generated, does it create net metering at all in Massachusetts?
It does create net metering, but you have to size it for no more than 100% of the load on the meter.
So, for viewers that are not familiar with net metering, can you really briefly, at a high level, just explain how it works?
Yeah. So you put solar on the roof, you put the wires from that solar, you connect it between your building and the meter, right? So now when you generate power, let's say you're running your electric stove, that power is going to go to your electric stove. Let's say it's the middle of the day and you're at work. Nobody's running anything. Dryer's not running, electric stove isn't running, but you're generating all this power. Where's it going? Well, instead of going in the house, it's going out the meter. And the meter's turning backwards. So you're basically creating a bank. And the utility is keeping track of how that meter turns backwards. Now, later on at night, you come home, you push the button on the dryer, you need power, but the sun's not out. The utility, National Grid or Eversource, send it back to you, and now the meter spins forward, right? So all that negative energy that went out now comes back and gets delivered to you, and your net is zero because you generated it earlier in the day and the utility was nice enough to store that and send it back to you basically,
Hmm.
right? They didn't really store it, they sold it to the guy across the street, but they're nice enough to send it back to you. Now people out there might be listening and saying, hey, wait a minute, what do you mean they're nice enough to send it back to me? In a net metering model, you don't pay for delivery in Massachusetts. You don't pay for delivery when the energy comes back, right?
With the net metering.
With net metering,
Okay.
right? So they've set it
Because
up.
you delivered it first, is the idea?
Well, yeah, sort of. You sent it out, they sold it, but they still had to deliver it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Technically, the utility owns the pipes and the poles, So they have to make money on delivering the energy somewhere else because they don't own the generation, right? So you generated the power, they took it and delivered it to the guy across the street, and they charged the guy across the street delivery and transmission, right? When you brought that energy back, they had to bring it from a generator. Maybe it was gas fired or something, right? That energy was being generated somewhere in the middle of the night when you pushed the button on your dryer, and they delivered it to you, but they didn't charge you delivery because they were taking electrons out of your bank. They were taking credits, solar
Mm-hmm.
credits out of your
Mm-hmm.
bank. So that's how net metering works.
That's interesting. So, just out of curiosity, just kind of structuring it for like a landlord who has maybe 4 units, not five, but in a space like that where you have, or maybe it doesn't make sense because there's not enough production for each unit individually, can you at least assign it towards like the common areas, which are considered commercial space,
Yes.
where it has its own meter on there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. What you can do, if you have a big enough complex and you have multiple commercial meters on that complex, you can put solar in one location, put it in behind one of the meters, and you can do what's called a Schedule Z, and you can share the overproduction. Because let's say you have it behind one common area meter that only costs $100 a month, right? You can be generating $1,000 worth of energy and take it and using Schedule Z, break it up across 10 other meters on your site, right? Doesn't have to be behind every meter, but it's basically your energy. You can either Schedule Z it to your home
Oh wow.
if you wanted to do that.
So
So
it can be
right,
done.
yeah.
Okay. So just kind
And
of
when you
really
Schedule
quickly.
Z it, you do pay transmission distribution.
You do.
Yeah.
Okay. And now is this a pretty simple process that can be done during the planning and estimating phase?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. And this can be done on multifamilies of 4 units to more than that?
100 units. Yeah.
So this could be a great option for landlords.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
interesting.
Every landlord should at least zero their common area.
Well, that's something that you don't see a lot of, is that a lot of commercial properties that have multi-unit dwellings don't have a lot of solar in them.
Right.
And I feel like when I've spoken to them in the past, it's often because they don't know how to distribute the energy throughout the building to maximize its energy efficiency, because the way they're looking at it is they're not going to pay for solar to give it to their tenants,
Right.
right? But if it makes sense for them to apply it towards all the common areas, which is an expense that the owner has to carry, that makes sense.
Right.
Okay.
Well, for a large commercial residential properties, 15 units or more, they're going to be bound by the new Massachusetts legislation under the large building energy reporting program. So like Boston, they will be held accountable for how much emissions their building generates. So if you own a building out there that's 15 units or more or greater than 20,000 square feet, you really seriously should be talking to someone like me to figure it out, because right now, like I said, the incentives are blindingly good. They won't always be that way. And when the mandates kick in as a commercial property owner, now you'll have to spend money, as opposed to right now, I can show you how it makes money.
Cool. So, what differentiates? I mean, we talked about a little bit about the 4 unit versus the 5 unit,
Yeah.
and sort of that differentiating some of the programs available. But it sounds like these properties that maybe even have, would a two-family home qualify for these programs as a commercial space, or is that considered more on the residential side?
No, if it's commercial, if you have a two family home and you're renting both locations, both families, um, I mean, I'm not an accountant. You got to check with your accountant, but I assume you're filing the taxes on that as a commercial property.
As an LLC, like a real estate LLC
Right.
or something like that.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And so those would still be eligible for a lot of these incentives through next year.
That's right.
When do the programs end next year?
July 1st.
July
By
1st.
July 1st, you have to have the project started. The difference between that program end and the program end that's going to happen
The residential
residential
one.
in July, if you have a project started and you've spent more than 5% of your construction budget, you're grandfathered to complete that project for
Okay.
4 years.
Okay.
So you get a 4 year window to finish it.
Are there programs available and additional incentives available outside of the tax credits that people could take advantage of for those?
Um,
That might be interesting and appealing to some businesses?
Not really. I mean, the tax, the tax credit, the depreciation, the high smart incentive. I'm telling you, once you look at those numbers and you put it together, if somebody gave you anything more, the system would go in for zero cost. It's
Mm,
crazy. Like you'll break even in like somewhere between 2 and 3 years.
wow.
I've seen systems pencil in under 2 years.
Wow. So it makes a lot of sense
Yeah.
on there. So kind of a couple more questions related to like, kind of maximizing the energy efficiency, especially if people are now starting to transition to sustainable transportation and electric vehicles and plug-in vehicles. You know, people are starting to explore adding, battery storage and EV chargers. Is that sort of a smart combination to add to your existing solar system? And is that something that you want to do during the initial planning and installation phase, or is it something to add later? And does it make a difference of the
So,
timing?
all right. So, first of all, with regards to the questions of efficiencies, you always want to conserve before you attempt to generate, right? Conservation is your lowest hanging fruit. So get somebody in there that understands energy auditing and have your home looked at.
Like a mass save program, right?
Yeah, like a mass save,
Okay.
right? Um, get someone reputable to come in and look at your home and figure out where's the low hanging fruit because you could be generating solar, but you could have massive, air leaks under your doors, and you could have, massive air seal leaks in your walls. You know, one of the easiest things I tell people to do is go outside your house at 6 a.m. when the sun's just coming up, after the frost has hit, and look at your roof. Right? If you see lines on your roof, that's heat that's escaping through your walls. Those lines are your walls, air seal leaks, heat escaping up into your attic and melting the frost off of your roof, right? So you want to stop that first. That's
Mm-hmm.
going to save you way more money per dollar spent. Then look at generation, right? Then look at things like, solar to generate electricity or even solar thermal to generate hot water,
Mm-hmm.
right?
That's actually really great feedback, and I actually love the order of it because it makes logical sense, right? And the title now, renewable energy analyst, financial analyst, makes sense now,
Right.
right? Because we're looking at the
It's all
financials of
about
it, right?
financials. It's all about financials, right?
So
It's how do you put more money into the homeowner's pocket, right? Which again is the reason why homeowners don't want to lease their roof. They don't want to succumb to somebody knocking on their door saying, I can give you 25% discount on your electricity, because they really could be knocking on your door saying, I want to give you a 60% discount on your electricity. They could be doing that and still making good money. But they're not doing that,
mm.
right? So that's why you never want to lease your roof. You always want to own the system. Just talk to your banker, and they'll help you figure out, how to pay for it.
So you're a proponent of not leasing, not doing power purchase agreements, but rather figuring out what's the best structure for you to actually own your own system.
Exactly.
And then in terms of like rather than what you were, I think the example that you were using is instead of paying your utility company, you're essentially reapplying that money towards your solar system, right? Is
Right.
that how you were sort of
Exactly.
explaining it
Exactly.
on there?
And then after you break even, you're reapplying the money to your own family.
Yeah, that's great. So that I love the way that you kind of work through that. And you're absolutely right about the fact that like solar and energy costs, excuse me, energy costs in general are just going to continue to rise.
Yeah.
Especially here in Boston, we've seen major spikes over the last couple of years,
Yeah.
especially when there's very, very high demands. No, kind of transitioning a little bit about like what we were talking about with combining, energy storage solutions and EV chargers. Does it make sense to add a battery storage for
It
your
it
for your
it
solar?
it depends, right? So if you're in an area where you're losing power constantly, battery storage makes sense, right? Um, you don't want, your freezer, for example, to start thawing food, right? But if you're not in an area that loses power on a regular basis, that's a big expense, especially to a lot of families. I don't know if I would recommend being pushed into putting a battery in, um, unless I, really had something that was either life threatening going on inside the house, or I was in a location that for some reason had constant power failures.
Mm. Now, I know a lot of people are using them as a way to supplement their energy at night, where they're using the solar system to charge up their battery banks during the daytime,
Mm-hmm.
and then at night it's switching to actually run on the battery
Yeah.
storage, and that way they could kind of make the utility sort of obsolete, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
on there. And then, if necessary, if the utility company needs to draw power from it, they can give you a higher credit back. Now, for those homeowners that are using this that in that method, do you see any advantage to that?
No,
Okay. Why is that?
financially, it doesn't make sense.
Why is that?
When you run the numbers, it's costing you more money than it had you just bought that electricity at night if you needed it, right? And plus, keep in mind, the utility is willing to send you back that power at night, right?
Mhm.
For free, no transmission fees.
Mhm.
So,
Because of the credits that you've already.
well, because of net metering,
Okay.
right? So why spend the money to try to store the energy when the utility is saying we'll store it for you for free and send
Okay.
it back to you? Now they didn't store it, like I said, they sold it to the guy across the street, but they sent it back to you for free. So why burden your family with an expense that you don't really need?
Now, let's add the scenario where they're driving an electric vehicle. Let's say they're driving a new Tesla, a new Ford Mach-E, or another form of electric vehicle. It's very high demand right now. There's a lot of interest in people making the transition to what they're saying is more sustainable transportation. And we know that most charging happens at home, and most of the time it happens at home in the evening hours on there where they're drawing more of that energy from the home. Does it make sense in that situation, or no, still no?
No, still no.
Okay.
They should charge at home because it's going to cost them less than charging outside of the charger. But keep in mind, remember, the utility has offered you to be the battery for you at no charge.
Mm-hmm.
So you may as well take advantage of it at
Gotcha.
no charge,
Okay.
right?
So this is a very interesting perspective because there's been very different narratives about this, and it's a very controversial topic about whether or not it makes sense for you to combine that battery storage, and that EV charger at the same time. Now, when you're doing your initial design and implementation of the solar system, do you want to take into consideration that you are going to own an electric vehicle and that you are going to be drawing a lot of usage from that, so that when you're designing and building out the solar, it takes that usage into consideration?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You want to put as much on your roof as you possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with that said, that doesn't mean you cover your entire roof with panels because it depends on the geographic orientation of the roof. You may have sides of the roof that do not have good solar exposure, right? Now, if there's somebody out there knocking on your door to sell you a PPA, they're going to put panels on that lesser solarized side of your roof, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
they're being paid based on the size of that PPA. But from an investment perspective, those panels aren't going to pay for themselves as well as the panels on the side that's say, self-facing. So you really need to be engaged with a solar contractor you trust that's going to look at your roof and say, if you put panels on the south side of your roof, they're going to be valued at X because they're going to be able to produce this much energy. If you put panels on the northeast side of your roof, those panels aren't going to produce as much energy. Therefore, the payback on those panels is going to be much further out there. So my recommendation would be don't put them on the northeast side, just put them on the south facing side.
Right.
So you have to make decisions like that because it's all about how much power is it going to generate and what's the value of that power, right? So if you have a panel that just because it's on your roof, it's only going to generate half the power of a panel on the other side of the roof. It's not worth it to spend the money on that panel that's
Yep.
generating half the power.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's well said. Thank you for sharing that. Now, just kind of bringing it back to kind of like looking at the consumer's best interest and making sure that we're giving them good advice that they can implement right away. What are the best practices when they're getting estimates from solar professionals to make sure that they're having a positive experience and making sure that that estimates are fair and accurate?
Um, you give each solar company the same sort of request for quotation, right?
Mm-hmm.
You give them the same electric bill. You give them the same list of desires, meaning I think I'm going to buy an electric car or I have an electric car, right? Well, if you already have an electric car and you're charging it at home, then it's going to show up in your history.
Right.
But if you're not charging it at home, you want to tell them that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you want to give everybody the same list of criteria and be upfront with them and tell them, I only want solar panels put on my roof where they're going to generate the maximum amount of power. As soon as you say that, you sound like an educated solar consumer, right? So they're going to get it. They're going to understand it. right? And they're all going to come back to you with competitive quotes, and then you make a determination from there as to how you want to move forward.
Any red flags that you would caution homeowners about with solar companies, especially now that these incentives are kind of running to the end?
um, yeah, if they come in with their own finance package,
Oh, interesting. So that is something that a lot of contractors offer now for convenience purposes. Why do you caution people about that?
because there's usually very heavy fees built into it, right? You tell the solar contractor, it's like when you buy a car, right? Go in and tell them you're going to pay cash, right? Get that number first. That way you know what the value of the transaction looks like. Then, if you want to go back to them and say, "Hey, can you help me finance it?" you get a different answer than if you just walked in and say, "I want that." What are the monthly payments going to be, right? Because now you can take that number and you can bring it to your bank and you can compare your bank's um, lending offer terms with the solar company's lending offers and terms.
Yeah, that's great advice. And you're absolutely, I think that's actually a really good perspective because a lot of people become victim of you know, falling for the payments, right? Where it's like, oh well, it's gonna be, only $99 a month for the solar system. And on paper it sounds nice, not realizing that your interest behind that is 14 to 20%.
Right,
Or there's a hidden fees where there's dealer fees that they don't disclose to the consumer
right,
because they're private hidden fees that the contractor pays
right,
to win the job.
right,
So these are actually really great points, Frank.
right. Well,
So
one of the
thank you for
things they
sharing
don't
that.
point out, just so that you know,
Yeah.
when they get to the PPA model, is they come in and they say, "I'm going to cut your bill by 25% today," but they bury in a 3% escalator,
Okay.
right? So every year, let's say your bill is $200 a month. Every year, it's going to go up by 3%, right? So it's going to be $206 next year, right? And then it's going to be 3% more the next year, and 3% more the next year. So you basically signed up for a 20-year.
That's actually how most leases work, is lease and PPAs,
Yeah.
because leases are usually like between a 1 and 3% escalator.
Okay.
So that's interesting that you bring that up. So this is actually really great advice for anyone that's watching this and wants to make sure that they're making informed decisions about solar. And this is residential and commercial. This kind of goes both ways. Is that if you're getting a quote, make sure it's the cash price to make sure that you're looking at the raw numbers. And yes, of course, when you're looking at cash price, it might be a scary number. It might come in 30, 40, 50, $60,000 for a solar system on there, but at least having those numbers, kind of like where you're at, what the concrete numbers are going to be, and you could present that to the bank and figure out from there what the actual interest is, what your payments are going to look like. If you're going to need to put any money down, if it makes sense for you to do that, you could kind of figure it out that way, as opposed to trying to figure out the payments and then kind of reverse engineering them with all these escalators. It's a lot harder to do.
Right.
So that's actually really great
Right.
advice.
Right.
And I
Trust
love.
me, if you're working with a reputable solar company and you get a quote that comes back at $50,000, you're generating a lot of power. That means you're consuming a lot of electricity.
Yeah.
So take that quote, go to the bank, and have your bank talk to you about what those payments look like. Now you're making payments, but you're making them basically to yourself because
Hmm.
you crafted yourself a much better deal than having someone come in with their solar loan program and jumping in the middle of your deal and taking some of your gain off the table.
What just to kind of this is information has been written incredibly helpful. We've looked at the solar from a really unique perspective because we started with really making sure that we understand